Hi everybody, David Kennedy here, and you're very welcome back to the channel. In today's video, I want to look at 4 music theory lessons that we can take away from the song We Don't Talk About Bruno in Disney's Encanto. I know that there are many YouTube videos out there already dissecting this song, but I just wanted to add a few things to the conversation that I've noticed myself. I also feel like a bit of an Encanto connoisseur at this point, as my kids are on their 1 millionth view. The lessons of music theory that I cover are all timestamped below, but broadly they are: number 1, groove and syncopation; number 2, melody writing, with a particular reference to melody writing for characters in a film; number 3 is some of the scales that are used and some of the harmonic music theory that's going on in the song; and the 4th area is about song development and some production techniques that are used throughout the song. I hope you enjoyed these takes, and if you have any comments, please leave them below. If you like the video, hit like, and I'll be doing more song analysis like this in later videos, so please hit subscribe if you want to see those. So without further delay, let's get into lesson number 1, which is groove. So the first thing we need to talk about when it comes to the groove of this song is the bass part, and it sounds like this. So as you can see, the bass part here is very syncopated. It begins on the beat for beats 1 and 2 of bar 1, but then after that, the rhythm is displaced on the and of each of the beats. So we get 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and 1. This displaced rhythm creates syncopation. Syncopation is when we emphasize an offbeat. In this case, the and of 1, the and of 2, the and of 3, or the and of 4. It's this friction or jarring between the meter, that is 4/4 time, and the syncopation that creates the sense of groove. When we listen to music, we tend to like syncopation because it defies our expectation for things to happen on the beat. These minor violations of our expectations actually make the music sound more interesting to us and make us want to move or dance along. And that's exactly what's happening here. And just to make reference to the chord progression quickly here, it's perfect for a loop as it ends on the chord of 4 in the given key, C minor. And because that progression ends on an F minor chord, it creates a perfect loop. In C harmonic minor, the chords are as follows: C minor, D diminished, E flat augmented, F minor, G dominant 7, A flat, B diminished, and back to C minor. So in creating progressions that we want to loop throughout a song, sometimes it makes sense to end on chord 4, as that creates a plagal cadence, and then it can endlessly loop back into itself. The drum parts in the groove are also helping emphasize the syncopation of the bass by being very on the beat. So the drum part, as you can hear now, emphasizes the 1 beat and the 3 beat in a bar 4/4. And it's the juxtaposition between the bass part and this very on the beat percussion part that emphasizes the syncopation we feel and hear. The last area of this groove that we need to pay homage to is the tempo that was chosen. The BPM of the track is 103, and I would bet my house that Lin-Manuel Miranda and the other songwriters deliberated extensively on what BPM should be chosen. The importance of tempo for a song like this can't be overstated. Literally 2 or 3 BPM in the difference, either more or less, can lose all sense of groove. I'm going to play through now an example of it sped up and an example of it slowed down, and then return to the 103 just for reference. And I think you'll agree that 103 is the Goldilocks tempo for this song. It also takes into account that some of the melodies move very differently rhythmically throughout. We have some that are on semiquavers through the whole thing, and then others who are on quaver movement or longer notes. And I think 103 encompasses all of those melodies perfectly. And now on to lesson 2, which is all about the melodies that appear in the song. So when it comes to the melodies and the melodic features throughout the song, it pays to give an overview of how those melodies come in and out of the song, and also how they interact with one another. So to begin with, we get Peppa and Felix's melody, and this is a combined one as Felix acts as an imitation to most of Peppa's lines. And then the next melody is Dolores. Hers is followed by Camillo, and then there's a break away from the main characters of the story, and there's a variety of townspeople who speak of the ominous nature of Bruno's visions as they happen in their own life. After that section of melodies with townspeople, we return with Isabella's melody. And interestingly, we're now in E flat major, which is the relative major of our home key C minor. Isabella, after all, is the golden child of the family, so her melody being presented in a major key makes a lot of sense. Dolores then has an additional melody that she also sings in E flat major, and then the song grows to a climax where all of the melodies we've heard up to now in isolation are sung together. This creates a wonderfully rich polyphonic texture. So what can be learned about melody writing from a closer look at each of these melodies? Well, let's start with Peppa's melody and Felix's counter melody to begin with. So while Peppa's melody and actually a lot of the melodies are quite simple in their note choice, they add interest and variety in the use of rhythmic devices. The first thing I want to look at is anticipation notes. And before we get to anticipation notes, I just need to clear up what I mean by a chord note and a non-chord note. In melody writing, chord notes are considered to be those notes that belong to the chord that's accompanying the melody. So looking at bar 1 of Peppa's melody,
it was my wedding day.
We have G, E flat and G belong to the chord that's underneath it, which is C minor. On wedding day, we switch to the chord of F minor, and now we have 2 sets of non-chord notes when we do G, E flat against. And these non-chord notes actually make an extension of our F minor chord to include the 9th. If we count up 9 notes from F, we get G, and the 7th, which is E flat, because if you count up 7 notes from F, you get E flat in this key. I won't go through each bar as meticulously as bar 1, but I'll continue through Peppa's verse a little bit like this, so that we have a framework of terms that we can work from. In bar 2, we have the chord G7, while the notes F, D, F, D sound on the words we were getting, and then we change to F minor on the words ready and there. And on the lyric ready and there, we have an example of neighbour notes. So the chord is F minor, and the notes of the melody are F, G, F, G. The G's in that part of the melody will be considered upper neighbour notes, meaning that they're not belonging to the chord, but they happen just beside a note of the chord. Neighbour notes tend to happen on weaker beats of the bar, that is the and of 1, and of 2, and of 3, or and of 4. And once you've gone to a neighbour note, the reason why it's called a neighbour is because it returns to the chord note it was just on. On bar 3 of Peppa's melody, we see another example of neighbour note, as in the C minor chord, we have the note G, and then on the offbeat, we have an A flat, which is not belonging to the chord, and that returns to the note G again of C minor. Then on the F minor chord, we have a non-chord note at the start, creating a lovely suspension. From B flat to A flat, which is a chord tone, G, which is acting as a passing tone here, and then landing on the 7th of our G7 chord. And we can go through the entire melody like this, identifying where our passing notes are, where our neighbour notes are, and where our chord notes are. But it makes for a very long and boring YouTube video, so I'm going to go on now to quickly mention 2 more things about Peppa's melody before moving on to the rest. I talked about anticipation note earlier. That's happening when the note of a melody comes before the chord change, or comes at the very end of a bar. So for instance, in bar 3 of Peppa's melody, where it says, wasn't a cloud in the sky, the word sky here would be an example of an anticipation note because it ends on the and of 4 and continues on into the next bar. This also adds to the groove that we talked about earlier, and all of the melodies to varying degrees do this type of thing rhythmically. So there's just 2 more things I want to note in the second half of Peppa's melody, and that is the syncopation used at the end of bar 1 in the second half. This is the now famous Tresillo rhythm, but it's on the latter half of the bar. So we get 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a. She repeats this 3 times, and the last thing I want to note about Peppa's melody is on her 3rd iteration, she does this. The last note of that melody is a B flat, and that's coinciding with the chord G7. What we get is this sound. In isolation, that sounds quite dissonant, but in the context of the song, it actually creates what we know as a G7 sharp 9 chord. This is commonplace in jazz music. The dissonance is coming in because we've got a B natural in that G7 chord, and we've got a B flat in the upper melody. And it's this tension between the B natural and the B flat that on the one hand creates dissonance, but on the other hand is a point of interest. So we're only 1 melody in, and what we need to understand is the composers of this song knew that they were going to amalgamate all of the melodies at the end of the song all together. So they needed to write these melodies so that once they were layered on top of each other, the dissonances that I've talked through so far didn't become overwhelming. So it's a tight and intricate web or jigsaw that the composers have had to work out. While Peppa doesn't touch the B natural note in a C harmonic minor scale, which is this, Felix does use the B natural from time to time. Moving on to Dolores' melody, there's a lot less to say here in terms of note choice. This semi-quaver pattern or 16th note pattern creates a really cool contrast to the underlying syncopated bass line. Dolores' melody largely consists of just 2 notes, F and G is definitely the majority of those notes. There's also a lesson in music theory here in that tonic notes and dominant notes, that is C and G in this context of C minor, tend to work well against any chord. So despite many melodies happening on top of this melody, and despite many chord changes happening, the G note and the C note would tend to be relatively safe choices, regardless of the changes that are going on. The baton is next passed to Camillo, and the function of this verse is to get across the idea of Bruno as a very creepy and scary character. This is the first time we have a very obvious use of the harmonic minor scale, and it's made all the more creepy by emphasizing the augmented second that happens in that scale. Personally, I love the sound. But for better or worse, in formal music education settings, we're told to avoid this augmented second sound. There are many examples of melodies both in the classical world and elsewhere that use the augmented second very expressively in their melodies. And used here on Camillo's melody, I think it does a brilliant job at reflecting the character. The next main character that we have a melody for is Isabella.
He told me that the life of my dreams would be promised and someday be mine.
Isabella is the golden child of the Madrigal family, and as such, her melody happens in the relative major key of E flat major. Relative, major and minor keys are related in that they share the same key signature. If we were to use the key signature that's written here as expressing the major key, we would consider this key to be E flat major. To get to the relative minor of any major key, all we have to do is go to the 6th degree of the major key, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, C in this case, and then play the same collection of notes but starting from C. This is considered the natural minor scale, or C natural minor in this case, because all of the notes are as they would naturally occur in the E flat major scale, just beginning on C. To make it harmonic minor, all we have to do is raise the 7th degree above C in this case, giving us a B natural note. So here we are with Isabella's melody in E flat major. Again, here we have a series of stepwise movement, chord tones, non-chord tones, and anticipation notes. But I think the clever thing to note here is that when the melodies all mix together at the end of the song, the chords used are actually in the relative minor key of C minor. The way that Isabella's melody is written means that it fits in both the relative major key and the relative minor key at the same time.
He told me that the life of my dreams would be promised and someday be mine. He told me that the life of my dreams would be promised and someday be mine.
So all that's left is for us to look at lesson 4, which is about song development and some points of music production that happen throughout the song. So while the melodies, harmonies, scales used, and all of the rhythmic devices that are used are really important in understanding the essence of this song, a modern analysis of a pop song, in my opinion, would be seriously lacking if it didn't take into consideration the importance of certain music production techniques. I'm going to show you some of these things by using a website called moises.ai. This is an artificial intelligence website that can do track separation on any piece of music you upload to the site. I'm not going to play a lot of each part of this because I don't want to get copyright strikes here, and I want to stay within the realms of fair use, so I'll just be making brief reference to specific moments as the song develops. So here we are on the Moises homepage. You simply type in moises.ai into your web browser and it'll bring you here. This website is powered by artificial intelligence, and the feature I'll be showing you today is track separation. This is using a free account that I've signed up to just using my email. You hit the sign up button here and away you go. I already have an account, so all I need to do is log in. And once you have your account and you log in, here's what you'll see in your library. To upload a track, it couldn't be simpler. You upload the track based on whether you want mastering to happen or whether you want track separation, and we're going to do track separation today. You can drop files from your computer or upload files from your computer, so if you have the MP3 or WAV file already stored in your computer, you can do it that way. Or even simpler again, you can insert or copy and paste a URL link. So if I go to a YouTube video, you hit share, copy, and then over here you paste it in. And then when you hit next, you get the option of breaking the track down into various components. The first one here is usually the best result. Vocals, drums, bass, and other. Vocals, drums, and bass make sense. The other usually encompasses piano tracks or synthesizer tracks or sound effects tracks, depending on where they sit in the mix. And when you hit upload, then it will bring it to a queue and will upload. It usually takes 5 to 10 minutes for that to happen. As the AI works, it's magic. I won't do that right now, but here is one I prepared earlier. And now I have the song broken down into all of its parts. You can solo and mute whatever you want within this little mixer window. And obviously just hitting the play button here on the left will play it.
And there wasn't a cloud in the sky.
So with that introduction to Moises out of the way, the first production technique I want to talk through is about the pairing of visual media with audio. This song is obviously from a film, and it's quite important that the sound matches what we see on screen. So on the music production side, that means making strategic use of panning. Panning is when we send a signal, for instance the vocals here in this case, to either the left or right speaker. So as Peppa and Felix dance around the screen, you will often hear the audio follow from right to left or left to right in whatever way they're doing that visually. You can hear this on the first verse.
But it was my wedding day.
It was our wedding day.
We were getting ready and there wasn't a cloud in the sky.
Related to this idea of pairing the visuals with the audio is the effects that are used throughout the song. All films use found sounds, or Foley sounds as they're sometimes called, to make their scenes appear more real. And the same is happening in this song. Playing from Camilla's verse here, you can hear the squeak of rats as they crawl up his back. And similarly, when Felix sings the words thunder, we hear a storm brewing. And that thunder sound has happened on this other track that I've just soloed now. Musically speaking, and purely on the music production side of things, the drums and bass here are acting as a kind of anchor and a central point around which everything can move. And this is common not only in film music, but in every genre of music, where the drums and bass, particularly the kick drum, would usually occupy the center space in the stereo field. The final area of music production that I think is worth mentioning is the idea of song development. While the foundation of this track is a simple chord loop and bass ostinato, there aren't 4 bars that go by without some new development or variation. And this happens mainly in how the instruments are added in or taken away, and also in the many timbres that are introduced throughout the song. This is a fairly broad point, but this happens in most modern music productions, where the devil is really in the detail. It's not so much how developed a song becomes in terms of its chord structure, although that can happen too. It's more about the sound development and the soundscape that develops over time. And while the changes can be nuanced and quite subtle, there is a very specific art to getting that balance right. This is why I feel personally that a song analysis that doesn't include music production is one that leaves a lot unsaid. Oftentimes, the reason why we love a piece of music and are emotionally moved by it has more to do with the music production than the chords, the melodies, or rhythms involved. So that's all I really wanted to say on the production side of things. But just the last thing I want to leave you with is the vocals stripped on the very last bit where all of the melodies are amalgamated. There's no reason to show you this other than I think it's really cool. So that's my fairly in-depth analysis of Encanto's We Don't Talk About Bruno. I hope you've enjoyed the deep dive on music theory here, and if you've any questions at all, please leave a comment below. If you've liked the video, please hit like, and if you want to see more of these types of analyses, please hit subscribe to stay tuned. Thanks as ever for watching. This has been David Kennedy, and I'll see you in the next one.